Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Teaching So Everyone Can Learn, a podcast from the Center for Faculty Excellence at New York Tech. I'm your host, Fikayo Edubemi, a faculty development specialist at the Center for Faculty Excellence. This season, we're exploring belonging and student success. What does it mean to belong on a college campus? And how can we, in our different roles, create spaces that support every student's sense of connection, identity, and growth? In this episode, I'm joined by Millie Gonzalez, New York Tech's first dean of libraries. We talk about how third spaces, such as the library, can be used to foster critical connections for students and establish that sense of belonging. Previously, Gonzalez was at Framingham State University in Framingham, Massachusetts, where she worked for nearly 20 years. There, she served as a librarian, interim chief diversity officer, and then as interim dean and dean of library. At New York Tech, Gonzalez focuses on providing strategic leadership, effectively prioritizing initiatives, and managing resources as the institution evolves into a robust, research-focused university. She works to integrate library resources into the curriculum and meet the scholarly needs of students and faculty while collaborating with academic departments to support interdisciplinary research initiatives. She earned a Master of Library and Information Science and a Master of Business Administration from Simmons University in Boston, Massachusetts, and a bachelor's degree from Hamilton College in Clinton, New York. Her professional affiliations include membership in the American Library Association and the Association of American Colleges and Universities, among others. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today, Millie. It's great to have this conversation with you.
Likewise, very excited.
Yeah, I can see like you have a lot of experience. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at New York Tech, as well as how long you've been at New York Tech?
So I've been at New York Tech relatively, I'm still am I still in my honeymoon phase? So I've been here since the end of February. So I got a little bit of the previous academic year and then preparing in the summer to prepare for the upcoming academic year. So I'm relatively new, but now I'm getting to know a whole bunch of people, which is really exciting. So in terms of what I do is I pretty much oversee all of the libraries on campus, and so all of the associate and associate directors and director report to me. And I basically support them and advocate for libraries, advocate to make libraries better for our students and for our faculty. And then also set the strategic direction for the libraries to prepare the libraries to support a research to institution.
That sounds very interesting. Can you kind of open up more about like what does it mean to make the library better supportive of students and faculty?
Sure. I think that what I find so rewarding about working in libraries, it's just really complex. It's always changing, and we're serving a whole bunch of different people in a variety of contexts, right? And in this case, we have different populations. We're supporting different colleges, so overarching STEM. But still, there are a lot of different flavors, right, in comparison to other institutions. So for me, that's why it was such a rewarding and challenging role to accept. So, first and foremost, we're here for students, right? And so we're here to support our students' success in their academic journey. And in terms of supporting them, I'm focusing on the whole student, not just one sliver of their academic experience, but the whole student. So I want our students to feel comfortable, welcomed when they enter the library physically, or whether they, send us a chat through the website, or using any of our online resources, or encountering us inside a classroom, or even just when we're at the library having a nice exchange. So it is important for us to support the whole student, and make sure that they feel welcome, that they feel that they belong at the institution, and most importantly, that they matter to us.
Yeah, that's actually really important. And I really like the philosophy of like approaching the whole students and not just like the academic side, but that they bring all sorts of interesting cultural contexts that really shape the way that they move through a university. And kind of on that note, because you touched on it, but I would love you to describe how you think about belonging in your work and how that shows up in the way that you are approaching your work as the Dean of Libraries.
So I'm very influenced by the academic scholarship of Dr. Terrell Strayhorn, who, in a sense, devoted a lot of scholarship to the sense of belonging for students in an higher education setting. And so I don't want to take away from his scholarship, so I actually have some of his notes. So, the sense of belonging is a universal need, right? We all want to have that feeling that we belong. And in this case, our students need to feel that they belong to our institution, that they're part of the institution, and that we want them there, right? The next is that the sense of belonging is a motive to drive behavior. So it could be positive or negative, but having that feeling that you belong, it will drive you to either success or, unfortunate in certain cases, alienation. Um, the context, time, and factors determine relative importance. And so, for example, it's so important for us to support the first year student experience, because that will, in a sense, inform, the signals that we send to them the second they get on campus will affect them, in terms of engaging with us outside and inside of the classroom. So it's a lot of that sense of belonging is context dependent. Critical to that sense of belonging is that the students feel that they matter to us, right? And that they feel respected, they feel accepted, they feel that we need them as much as they need us, and most importantly that they're seen for all different attributes, right? The sense of belonging is also influenced by one's identity, whether they're a first year student, right?
Mhm.
Whether they are a student from a low income background, whether they're a student of color, and all of, these identities intersect. So there's just not one identity, identities are complex, right? Um, and that sense of belonging again leads to, positive outcomes. So if a student has that positive experience and they feel welcomed and they feel that they belong, it will translate to an academic success, happiness, you know, it'll, not feeling alienated, not feeling lonely. And
Mhm.
then finally, it's must be satisfied as conditions and circumstances change. So a first year student's needs as they go, grow through their academic career, it's just not stagnant, right? The support that we give them, our interactions are different as they grow older, as we support them throughout their academic career. And so in terms of the library, how we can do that, we can support students throughout their whole journey, right? Whether it's physically, where, are engaging with them in the library, um, whether it's, making sure that when they enter the library, they feel that when they look around, they see positive, whether it's books that they can relate to, whether it's paintings, whether it's signage, the things that intrinsically they feel in their soul that we care about them, right? And then also, the resources that we provide to them will be critical to their academic success.
Yeah. And I think like the library is so uniquely positioned to support students throughout that academic journey because, like you said, when you intentionally meet them in that first year, then they are aware of like, oh, I have this resource available. I can go here when I need these things. I can go here for community because the library has all of this programming. I can go here for support in like my schoolwork if I need to figure out how to do research. This is my first time in a setting like this. I haven't done research at this level, but I can go to the library to do this type of work. And then as they go into second year, into third year, into fourth year, they are aware that they always have that resource at their fingertips. Um, so I completely like agree that the library is uniquely positioned to support students both like in the academic sense of like the intellectual stimulation, but also in the physical sense of like we have this space for you where you can feel like you're a part of this learning community.
And it's interesting because, when I think, the way that I was treated in libraries throughout my whole life really affects how I want someone to feel when they enter our libraries, right? And so for me, I really didn't feel that welcomed, right? And I even worked in the academic library, and I just felt that, I was really shy, and it was just really hard for me to reach out and ask questions,
Mm.
and so for me, I want to really totally change that paradigm. I want them to feel that they can ask questions, that when they see me, they see a friendly face, an open face, that I'll drop everything, because that's why I'm here, to serve them, right? To help them. You know, so so I'm channeling all of the stuff that happened to me in the different libraries, in public libraries. If the librarians would look at me kind of funny if I spoke Spanish, and so those are the kinds of negative things, those experiences really inform how I want to have a wonderfully welcoming library.
Yeah. And I think if you're comfortable, I would love to hear more about how your interactions with the library in your own time as like a staff, as a student has shaped the way that you're approaching like your work now as a dean of library.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'll never forget, I was just in awe of libraries,
Mm,
right? I couldn't believe that I can go, well, first of all, I just love books, being surrounded by them. And the fact that I can, at any point in time, I can learn something on my own that I didn't know, so I was always self-motivated learner.
mm,
And the fact that there was free, right?
yes.
So I couldn't afford, a whole bunch of stuff, but I can go to the library, I can check out a book, I can check out a DVD, I can do all of this stuff and better myself. So
Mhm.
for me, I always saw libraries, as sacred places. And then sometimes to have sort of negative experiences, it was interesting because when someone, actually it was a librarian who said to me when I was getting my MBA at the very end, she's like, I've never seen anybody more interested in a library.
Mm,
And I was like, yeah, because I love libraries. She says, you should be a librarian, right? And I was like, what? And because again, for whatever reason, I had that in my mind. Um, but as soon as I went to library school, I found my calling. I said, this is what I want to do. I was always helping people find information. I love interacting with students and faculty. I worked in a whole bunch of different types of libraries, public libraries, academic libraries. I worked in a pharmaceutical library, and I found my true sense of calling, working in an academic library, helping students. So all of my experiences came together, and led me honestly to this place where, I can provide support to our librarians, our library staff, to create this unified vision, that we're all here to support our students, and it's not a hard reach because they're wonderful. They're, you know, they already have that dedicated foundation. So, if anything, when I often look at them interact with the students, and the students, feel seen and they feel heard. And it's not, they're having just normal conversations. which is wonderful because that's what it is. It's building that positive relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I honestly share your love of libraries. I've always thought that like libraries are such incredible spaces because like you said, it's free. You have access to all of these resources. There's like, or like in an ideal world, the people who work there are really like the oracles. You go to them and you ask them a question like, how do I get this information? How can I do this specific thing? And they kind of point you in the right direction or they guide you where you need to go. And I almost like, oh, I always find librarians as like punk rock because they're kind of existing in this like very rigid world, but they're kind of breaking those systems down by democratizing access to knowledge and like giving a lot of people their first opportunity to fall in love with like research and reading and like with
And learning.
stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just I'm a fan of libraries, I'm a fan of libraries and librarians, and I think that the work that you do is so important to like society and to students and to learning. So fan
Thank
over here. But we're going to like change directions a little bit. And like talk about student success. So student success and belonging. So I'm curious for you, how can you like think about how belonging matters when we talk about student success and why are the two like intrinsically linked?
It is a critical element because as I mentioned before, what we want is to support the whole student, right? And they're not a blank canvas, right? They have different identities, different contexts, different ways of learning, different identities. So for us, we need to take our time to understand, the student that's right in front of us.
Mhm.
So I was a reference librarian a long time ago, and there's a technique or a process that they taught us in library school. It's the reference interview. So the first time, the first thing is you welcome the person in front of you, and then you ask questions and try to understand where they're coming from. Because a lot of times when a student, would ask me a question, I knew that it was sort of like the tip of the iceberg, right? And I also had to, make them feel comfortable to ask me a question.
Mhm.
So if a student feels at ease and they feel that they, ask a simple question, it could lead to a consultation. And so when I would do library instruction, my ultimate goal is for them to like me, to feel that they can approach me at any particular time. So I would say, if it's taking you more than 10 minutes to research a topic or come up with a topic, or even learning how, trying to figure out where to start, just come see me and I'll get you started, you know. And so that sense of, belonging and mattering are critical because it really does lead to student success, right? And so when I look at my academic career, I was just, again, really shy, you know, um, I would never ever ask any questions because I just didn't want to bother anybody, was really shy. I didn't even want to ask any of my professors anything. And so, I share my experience with students because it's the exact opposite of what you need to do, right? For student success, right? But
Mhm.
you also have to have that sense of agency. You know, professors want you to ask them questions, right? They want you to come and ask and come to their class after class and ask them questions and things like that. Something that I would never do because I was just so shy. So the other key point is that sense of validation, right? That you belong at this university, that you actually made it, that all of your hard work led to here. But the way that we treat them and the way that they feel validated that they can actually, be vulnerable, right? And ask for help. And then we can be like a partner in terms of, working together for throughout their academic career. And that I think is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like you keep touching on super important things, and that's something that when I have conversation with faculty, I always try to remind them is if the student doesn't feel comfortable with you and they don't feel like heard, then they can't advocate for themselves, right? They're like, and that's just a human thing. It's not even specific to students. It's like when you go into a space and you're nervous and you feel like, I don't know anybody here, nobody knows me. How do I start trying to make those connections? It's hard. But in an academic space, we're then uniquely positioned where the power structure is so evident that as the faculty, as the administrative staff, you're aware of your role in this space and how you can then guide the students into that like comfort, and then they can begin to like advocate for themselves and ask those questions, and they can start to seek out help because they know based on like the way that you have set the climate up that they will be ultimately like helped and served, and that their success matters to you, and because their success matters to you, then they are more like empowered to seek out that like those success actions. um
Exactly.
yeah, and I really love like the intentionality around let's foster this space for students so that then they can start to seek out the supports that they would need to succeed. And like on that note, can you tell me like what specific things that the libraries at New York Tech does? I would love if you can like even break down because New York Tech is very interesting. There's a New York City campus and there's a Long Island campus. And the way that students interact on both campuses are very different because of the way that the campuses are laid out in these two spaces. So I'd love to hear what are some things that the librarians do intentionally so students have that sense of belonging and then they can then begin to seek out those resources and supports.
So one of the things that, that the libraries do successfully is that we hire students, right?
Mm,
And so they're the first line, that when they come into the library, they see, a happy library staff is a happy library, happy library student worker is a happy library, right? So for me, when we hire students, we want them to stay with us throughout their whole academic year. They're our best ambassadors, right?
mm,
And so, so one nice short conversation with a student worker can lead to a longer conversation, transferring it to a librarian, right? So I think that is really critical. The other thing that, that we've done is we've created a year-long student engagement calendar. So two librarians sat down and they say, okay, what are the kinds of entertaining, fun, engaging activities that we can do every month? And so that's what we have. We have a student engagement calendar because we want the students to engage with us,
mhm,
whether it's celebrating Heritage Month, whether it's celebrating, honoring banned books, and then also sprinkling in academic workshops like citation management and, how to search and things like that. So, being very proactive and thinking about their student needs, and then, providing an easy way for them to engage with us. So all of our events are, right now they're in the calendar, our
mhm,
library calendar. The other thing that we're working on is just a really important project is we're going to improve the library website to make it a lot more user-friendly, easy to navigate. So, so that is critical to student success. So, so sometimes, students will engage with us only through the library website
mhm,
or only through chat. So that virtual experience has to be just as good as someone who's coming into the library. But certainly when you come into the library, we want you to hang out. We want you to, hang out with your friends. We want you to study, if you want to, study with a group or by yourself, if you want to be in, quiet, or if you want to engage in like, group discussion. Um, the interactions that I've observed with our librarians is just really special because they come and they say, they talk about their day. Oh, I'm going to go to this class, and oh, this, professor is hard, or, you
mhm,
or just, silly stuff like, oh, I saw Superman. What did you think of it? Those are kinds of connections. So, so it really is supporting the whole student and thinking of what can we do, whether it's, giving them a free laptop to borrow,
Mm.
or having, a comic, a graphic novel for them to look at, or attending, a class on just whether it's a drawing,
Mm.
just doing things that I think that we're trying to come up with ways to understand what would motivate students and make them happy. And then finally, I'm working on distributing a survey because I want students to tell us what they need,
Mhm.
right? So I don't want to make any assumptions. I've been working in libraries for a very long time,
Mm.
so I get a sense of the things that do work. Yeah, of course. But that doesn't stop me from the first important thing is, are we doing our job, listening to them,
Mhm.
um, and then tweaking the things that need to be improved.
Yeah. I think particularly like starting from the end, even with like because I'm also doing that in my work too, since I work with faculty, is there's like the baseline of what you need to do for students, like for faculty, but then there's also like the very context specific things that you might not know that's unique to a specific institution. And it's always good to like hear from the students. And I feel like that
Yep,
ties back to the first thing you mentioned of like having student workers. And like it's so important to have them in this space working. And they can even do that work too of like talking about the library to their peers of like, oh, did you know that we have this service available? You can do this. And they would, because they are part of the community and like they can see the day to day and the behind the scenes, they can do that work even better of like socializing what the library has available to other students. And I think like that part of like integrating the community and creating community specific events, like having the calendar, thinking about different touch points, like having the website, like okay, how do students access materials on the website versus coming into the library? All of those things are super important in getting students a feel of the different ways that they can leverage the library in their work and like going into this physical space as well as the virtual space.
definitely. I'm going to hire you for the library. You're the best advocate.
Honestly, I would take it. I do love the library. I think like I mean I've always had to, so when I was much younger, because I was kind of like the only child, not necessarily, but like I was the only baby at the time. My mom would just take me to the library and I'll hang out there like most of.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So I really did grow up like in the library and seeing the library as like a space to explore and to like just follow my curiosities. So I'm a true like fan of libraries. Okay, so now I'm curious. So you talk about like all the cool things that the library is doing. I'm also curious about what the challenges are. Are there any gaps that you see in terms of cultivating the sense of belonging? And how are you approaching closing those gaps?
Well, I mean, I think there's always challenges, but I see them as opportunities, and sometimes the opportunities take longer to deal with, right? To work through, I mean, my challenge for me is, I want to be more with, students, right? I want to be more out there with faculty. So my challenge is less Zoom meetings, right? And just, and especially too, and you mentioned it before, is like, that interaction with people is critical. So sometimes, that one-on-one, Zoom is fine to interact with people and accommodate different schedules, but nothing necessarily beats, that, personal face-to-face. So I see that as a challenge, but an opportunity for me is forcing myself to be at different events. And it's not even forcing, I love it, so extra action that I can, I love working with parents. I love working with student affairs, all different partnerships. I want to be out there and engage. with all of the different community. And so that, in a sense, gives me more exposure to students and faculty. So I think that, it's an opportunity to be at the different campuses, right? Not, here in Old Westbury, but in New York City, but also in Arkansas. Um, and I think that it could be challenging, but I think what it is you have to be intentional and say, okay, let me come up with a plan, and see if we can, engage, our staff and then our patrons in a regular way. The other thing too is I don't, and I mentioned the survey, so I don't like to assume people's needs, right? Because every survey that I've ever done, I've always, sometimes things that come up with the survey, we already know that it's been a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
that we're working on it and they might not know, certain things maybe I'm not aware of. So I'm really excited to do, and you also mentioned it before, there's different flavors. So what if it might work on Old Westbury, it might not necessarily work in, NYC. So learning the different cultures, the communities, things like that. Um, and one way, for me is just I love to just observe. And I observe, I listen, and then I probe, is this working for you? If is this working? How can we, work, and providing a better service, things like that. Um, so, so yeah, there's always challenges in terms of funding and staffing. Like us, we would love more resources and things like that. So that's why I'm here to advocate on the behalf of our students and faculty.
Yeah. I feel like the issue of like digital engagement versus in-person engagement is like a tension that as we go, as like the world continues to develop and we keep like building all of these technologies, it would always be a tension that universities have to think about of like how can we show the value of this physical space and coming into a physical space and having this like physical interactions. And I honestly think that like that is the value of the university, right? Because we're constantly having to, well, right now we're having that conversation of like if you can go on YouTube and watch a video and like do this like online certificate, why do you need to go to university? But then that's like limiting the view of like why you should go to school in the first place is like to just acquire knowledge, or is it like the full experience? Like you said, like the whole student.
Yeah, yeah.
And that like opportunity to engage in these different ways, like for example, through the library, as we're having this conversation of like if you can come into a library space and have all these different types of interactions, you have like different types of programming, whether it's through like a maker hub type of like working on some project with your peers that's specific to the library, or reading a good book, or talking to the librarians, or discovering a new research interest. That's kind of the extra thing that going to a physical space gives you that you might not get through just like a virtual interaction or a digital interaction.
But the thing is also is like when you do have that, and every interaction is important. So
Mm.
when you're interacting with me, I want you to see me as a person, and I want you to be seen as a person, right? So, so just trying to tear down those formalities, I
Yeah.
think will actually help those types of interactions and make them more enriching.
Yeah. Yeah. It gives you that extra sauce.
The secret sauce, exactly.
Yeah. And you mentioned this, but I'd like me to talk more about how the library is collaborating with faculty in order to support student success and belonging.
Yeah, I think that, our collaborations or the success of our libraries are, depend on the success of our partnerships.
Mm.
So collaborating within, academic affairs, collaborating, within, with student affairs, because I think what's unique about the library is like we are like the third space. We straddle, academic affairs and student affairs, right? And so we do a little bit of, what we do influences both, both of those spheres, right? So, so in terms of collaborating with faculty, we collaborate with faculty, especially with regards to their courses, whether it's coming into their classroom, and working with faculty and showing how they can use library resources in their particular assignment. That's great. Sometimes, it might be just having a librarian embedded within your Canvas course, and so if you have a question, there's a librarian there, right there in your Canvas course. Whether it's creating a specific research guide, whether it's for their class, whether it's for the discipline, whether it's for the assignment, those are the kinds of things that are just really, really helpful. But also, learning, what resources the faculty need, for their discipline. And making sure and advocating that we in the library have those resources for them, for their personal research, for their publishing, that they know, that they feel that we can help them in their personal research efforts as well as in the classroom. One project that I'm working with and I'm really excited about is textbook affordability, and so I'm going to facilitate a communities of practice on open educational resources that leads to innovation for faculty in their classroom, but also leads to textbook affordability as well as student success. So, so if I get that off the ground and really create a nice formal program structure for the university, I'll be happy as pie.
No, I love that. I love open education resources. I think they're super important, especially like when it comes to inclusion and accessibility, and all of that good stuff that supports students' success as well as faculty's work in ensuring students are successful. And on that note, I'm really curious about like what's the first step for a faculty who really want to work with a library and wants to bring in the library to support their teaching? What's the first step that they need to do to be able to get this off the ground and make it happen?
So on the website, there's a faculty toolkit, so they can just go to there, and then it lists ways of engaging with the faculty. The easiest thing is just pick up a phone, it's a very informal process, or you can fill out a form to book a librarian to come to the class. What's wonderful about our librarians, they have nice relationships with faculty, so they've been working with faculty, especially with faculty who are teaching, the gen ed courses. We also have wonderful faculty who have subject expertise, subject expertise as an architectural librarian, for example, or a medical librarian. So, I think it's just really easy for faculty to engage with the library. If anything, we're just like, we are there. We're just open and eager to interact in any which way. And a lot of it sometimes starts with oh, I have a class. And then it could lead to, oh, maybe you need, access to this research, or maybe you need, a librarian to, be in your Canvas course, or maybe you just need a research guide. So, so that simple conversation could lead to a nice, fulfilling relationship throughout their whole academic coursework.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that it's very easy to just do that. Just pick up the phone or go through
Pick up the phone, right?
yeah. Like just breaking down the barriers of like breaking down the bottlenecks so it's super accessible.
Yes, definitely.
So I think my final question is, what is your hope or your vision for a truly inclusive and supportive New York tech community?
Well, I think, I've throughout my whole career, I've paid particular attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, and, through a variety of whether it's creating events, whether it's through my work at the library, whether it's partnering with different departments. So for me, it's personal. I think it adds value, and it really supports student success, and supports the whole student, and of course the university. So myself, I'm part of the new ACE committee, and I want to be open and see what I can do to support an inclusive university. So yeah, I have a few tricks in my bag, that I can share. But most importantly is just to listen and observe, how can I help? You know, I think that what I've seen at New York Tech is that we have just a warm, culture, welcoming culture, faculty who are really dedicated to their students, staff, that, are really excited to help students throughout their whole academic career. So for me, it's, what can I do to be, to support, this ecosystem? And so for my vision is, call me, I'll be there. And I will, and I love working with students, and the more that I can support students and get to know students, the better it is for me to help them.
Lovely, amazing. I love that. And you're actually so right. New York Tech is a very, like, when I started working here, I was like, oh, this is such a wonderful university, because it seems everybody's so invested in student success. Everybody's really warm, everybody's super welcoming. And I think that shows in the way that everybody shows up to their work, and in the dedication of the way that we are willing to like support both staff, both faculty and students is just honestly incredible, because you don't see that in every university, right? And yeah, I think call Millie Gonzalez, join the community of practice.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
join the community of practice. Use the library resources; they're there for you with students and faculty. And yeah, this was such a lovely conversation.
Likewise, it's a pleasure.
Is there anything that you would like to share that I didn't ask you about, that you just love to like shout out or add extra context to before we finish the conversation?
No, I think we covered it all. I just want to, shout out to my library staff, my library team. They're just really terrific, in all the different libraries. So for me, I'm in awe of what they've done, and what they continue to do.
Yay! Shout out to the library staff. Honestly, they are very cool. I've spoken to a few of them, and they did suggest I speak to you for this podcast. I think they're doing very, very cool work, and I look forward to collaborating with the library even in my work as a faculty developer.
Yes, and I'm going to rope you in, and we can together we'll be a powerful team.
Yes. Thank you so much for this conversation. It was great to speak with you.
Thank you too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Millie Gonzalez. As you heard me say over and over again, I am a big fan of libraries, so it was great to hear about the intentional ways that New York Tech librarians are fostering institutional belonging for our students. I hope you learned a thing or two that you can take into your own practice and philosophy as a student-centered educator. And I'll see you in the next episode.